how is the church in the 21st century different from the early Christian church?
The church herself is not that different. There are some obvious ways in which it is. We've had 2 millennia to expand and grow and to, if you were, institutionalize things which were perhaps less formalized in the very early period. That's just a natural progress. When things are happening for the first time, they're a bit more fluid. When they're happening for the 10,000th time, a certain kind of pattern develops. So there are certain dimensions in which the structure of our church life is obviously and naturally different than it would have been, let's say, in the 1st century or the 2nd century. In substance, though, the church isn't different. And this is one of the things that orthodoxy really holds sacred. That even though certain dimensions change, and it's foolishness to pretend that nothing changes. Of course it does. The fact that we're sitting here talking into a video camera is something that early bishops would not have done. And that means we're allowed to communicate in a different way, to a different demographic, to a different size population than we were before. And a different manner of communication. It used to be that if you wanted to ask a question of a priest, you had to come and sit face to face and talk. Now, of course, we can go online and ask your questions and they'll pop up and so on. Well, it's different. And so the church adapts and lives in these different cultures. But the substance of what the church is never changes. God created humankind to live a life that He designed. And when we fell astray and started to live our life differently, badly, He did everything imaginable, including sending His own Son into this world to show us how to live. And the church is the embodiment of that Son's life. Christ came into the world to say, stop doing this because this leads you to sorrow. Do this instead and it will lead you to joy. The gospel is filled, if you read the scriptures, with Christ giving very basic instructions. Not basic in the sense that they're easy. Sometimes the instructions were very difficult. Go and sin no more. Well, that's a hard thing to do, but it's not complicated. It's a simple instruction. Go and forgive the people who have wronged you. Well, as anyone who has been wronged knows, that can be very hard, very painful. But it's not complicated. Right? God came into the world to deliver a gospel that at its core is a simple revelation of His love. And the church's work since those first days has been to give that revelation to the world around it. And sometimes we've had to do that underground because of persecutions. Sometimes we've been able to do it publicly and openly in times of peace. Those things change. They go up and down and they ebb and flow. History is never the same, 1 minute to the next, as we know very well over these last 2 years. Look how much in society has changed just with the pandemic and so on. And yet the job of the church and the work of the church has been constant, especially as the world changes. The more the world becomes complicated and distracted, the church all the more fiercely gives its simple, straightforward message. Live like this and you will find joy. Live like this and you will not escape from sorrow, but you will unite yourself to a God who can take your sorrow and make it into something beautiful. So in its essential manner, the church stays the same forever. Because God doesn't change. God doesn't decide in one generation to be loving and in the next generation to be wrathful. God doesn't say, in this generation, I'll give myself in the sacraments, but then I'll hide them in that generation. No, we are living the same sacramental life year in and year out. And people who come into the church today, presuming that the church is being faithful and the people in it are being faithful and authentic, they will hear the same message that was heard 100 years ago, 500 years ago, 1,000 years ago. The same message that Christ delivered to His apostles. And so will it be until He comes again. That's our work, and it will never stop.